Hey, everybody, welcome back to Inspired Action Life podcast. I'm your host, Karen Baldridge, and today I have a very interesting guest. You know, I like to pluck people out from different genres, different work environments, different careers to really unify a story of success leaves clues and that people just know when they know it's the thing that they're supposed to be doing. And so I have come upon a very interesting person that I'm going to let her tell her story to us today. And it's going to be a great one because she's got some interesting twists and turns to it. So, this is Kamini Woods, and she is a human potential coach. But she did not start out as a human potential coach. I'm sure that was a process, and we're going to listen into how she became that and what guided her, what was her North Star to lead her there, and how she took the courage to take that jump, because I guarantee you it didn't start there. So without further ado, I am going to throw this over to Kamini, and welcome, Kamini. It's so great to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and having this conversation with you because you're absolutely right. It actually was my North Star. I just didn't know it was my North Star until later on in life.
First point. Yes, indeed.
Yes, because honestly, I started off as a project manager. I started off my professional career as a project manager, ended up running a project management office. And what I kept finding in that role that I was playing, though, was that I was consistently finding myself working with individuals on what was it that they needed to maybe accomplish the project, or what was it that they needed in terms of their next level. How could I help them grow? Right. So for me, it was never just about finishing a project and moving on. It was always about the people. I always came back to the people. I ended up running a law practice, and the same thing happened. I could have been around the marketing. It could have been around running the files. But for me, again, it was about the people. It was about the clients. It was about the individuals at the firm itself. What was it that they wanted? How could I support them in their growth? Not just on a professional level, but a personal level. I've always been drawn to that. And when I think about it, at the age of 7, that's really what I wanted to do. I just wanted to talk to people, which is always so funny because I'm an introvert by nature and super shy child. And you think, wow, that's so strange. I'd want to talk to people, but really talking to people one-on-one is a sweet spot for me. It always has been, because I really love to listen to people. And I find that my empathy is actually probably one of my strongest my strengths that I have in general. Is just my fact that I can empathize with somebody, but I can pick up on what it is maybe they're not even saying, because I listen really, really carefully.
Well, critical
And
listening
I
is a
listen not just
skill.
and it's not just like listening to the words that are being said, but
Yeah.
also what's not being said. Right.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a skill. It is
That
definitely a
inference,
skill.
and not everybody has it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, so professionally, that's where I was. At the same time, I am the mom of 5. My oldest is actually 22. My youngest is 10 at the time of us talking to each other.
Yeah.
But at the time that all this was happening, they were all in that preteen, teen stage,
Mhm.
or I should say the middle children were, the middle older children. And I was starting to notice them somewhat have some people pleasing perfectionist tendencies, and recognizing that in them, I actually saw myself being mirrored back to me. And it was an invitation
Best
for
mirror
me.
ever. Best
Yes, for
mirror.
me to take a look at what was going on for me. I ended up doing a lot of my own self-work and self-growth at that point in time, and recognizing where I was holding myself back. That people-pleasing part of me was making sure that I was doing right by everybody else, not actually doing the thing that I really wanted to do, which was work with people. So through
Mhm.
my own self-growth and that
Mhm.
experience of what I went through in my own world, recognizing that high achiever self, that perfectionist self, that individual who wanted to step outside of what was expected of her, I was able to recognize that and start honing in on that. And I could take what I was really enjoying from a professional perspective,
Mhm.
bring those two things together. And that's actually what happened about 6.5, 7 years ago. I created this practice where I am now working with people one-on-one, helping them identify what is holding them back. Is it some false beliefs? Is it some limiting beliefs that they have? Is it imposter syndrome? Is it not enoughness? Is it perfectionism? What's holding you back, so that we can unpack that together and then work towards committed action to move you forward?
I love it. You're speaking my language. That is right in the swim lane that I get. I understand. And my story, weirdly and eerily, it very much matches yours. But what I think is interesting about what you said there, that I think a lot of people without recognizing it, is our children are the
Mhm.
best mirrors for who we actually are. They mirror back to us our high points and our very, very low points, our weaknesses and our strengths. And sometimes we don't like to recognize them until we see them in the children. You go, ugh,
Yes.
I know
Yes.
where they got that.
Yep.
I mean,
Yes.
that was
Yes,
learned
exactly.
from me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you hate to admit it, but it's also very freeing, right? I mean, and so
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you take that with your clients as well. Sometimes you'll probably be able to resonate with where they're at, and you go, I can
Yes.
help this,
Yes.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think that, and I say that that's what helps me do my work so well, is the fact that I can resonate on a very human level because I've been there.
all right.
I've experienced something very similar. But yes, to your point, our children are mirrors, and I always say that they are my greatest teacher that I have ever had in this lifetime.
Oh my goodness. Because again, you have no choice to other than to address the root cause of it. So that way, and it makes for good parenting. And I think you have probably shared that with a lot of your clients, is that right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you aren't up leveling this area, how do you expect your children to behave differently or more edifying, have a more edifying behavior if you yourself aren't doing that, or you can't see where you contributed to that? It's
Yeah,
radical
exactly.
self-awareness and radical
Absolutely.
responsibility, you know?
Absolutely. And I talk to my clients about this just in terms of like the idea of conscious parenting, right? If you're in
Hmm.
order to show up as a conscious and aware parent, doing that work on yourself, understanding what's going on for yourself allows you that room to shift for yourself so that maybe your children can learn a different way, right? So like in my case, it was recognizing the people pleasing, making shifts and changes so that my children could see mom showing up differently. They could learn a new way, and we break that pattern, right? Because
Yes.
if I look back, my mom, definitely a people pleaser, learned behavior on my part. There's no judgment or blame. It's just,
No,
okay,
it's
that's where
just
it
an
came from.
observation.
And then my children were repeating that. And now I'm noticing, especially with my middle daughter, who I saw most in at that time, she's
Mhm.
now 17, about to be 18, about to go off to college. And I have seen such a shift in how she's handled peer interactions, right? Instead of, sure, they're humans and they're going to have moments where there's the fear of missing out, but she has
Right.
had so much more awareness and confidence in saying, no, that doesn't work for me,
Mm.
versus just agreeing to things because of that fear of making somebody upset or not pleasing what her friends wanted to do.
It's
Mhm.
it reduces the drama when you can teach them to, detach that emotion from the situation, and kind of get above it and look at, like, that's interesting, like you just did. Like,
Yeah,
I observed it. Oh, my mom was like that. No aggression towards your mom. It's more an observation, right? Like you're on the
exactly.
observation deck watching a play, watching the
Yes,
whole thing
yes.
turn out. And
Hmm.
if you can harness that skill, I'm sure that's something that you probably nurture in not only your kids but your clients,
Clients as
and I
well.
think it's
Exactly.
life
Yeah.
changing.
Absolutely. It's becoming that non-judgmental observer, because as you step into observation, you become aware. With the awareness invites the option to change.
I love it. Well, tell me about your practice. How is it that do you have just individual contributors, or do you do it with groups, or what is your
Mhm.
method, and what does that look like when someone works with you?
Yeah, so as of today, it's just one-to-one. I work with ages basically preteen all the way through mature adult. So I work with the
Oh,
whole gamut
great.
of ranges. And we do one-to-one where I am in my method will shift based on the client who's sitting in front of
Mhm.
me, right? So I've definitely taken the time to train in different modalities, whether it be cognitive based modalities. So anything from acceptance commitment based modality, cognitive behavioral based modality, internal family systems. That's all great. But some of us get stuck in our thoughts. And so I've also trained in the somatic side, because sometimes we've got to take the bottom up approach. So let's learn about what's happening in our body. Where are we feeling that in our body? What does that
Mm.
feel like? Because if we get curious about that, that's speaking to us as well. And so I've just learned to sit with the person right in front of me, and wherever they're at, that's where I'm going to meet that person. And we're going to not just have a great conversation and ask, really insightful questions, but then it's all about coming back home to what are your values? What are your needs? What's going to be that committed action? So it's always about moving the client forward.
I love that because again, I always find it interesting, and I'm sure you've seen this too. Like when you follow or see or have even done any kind of corporate coaching, you understand this. Here's one thing I have learned, and I know you've come across this because you're in my same swim lane, is that they don't always have time to work on their self-development. So these skills that you and I might find is normal because we just normally fall into them, like, oh, this leads to this and this. When you get in front of an audience of high achievers, like in a corporate group setting, say like sales or whatever, I have found that that's not intrinsic to them. That is not just like second nature on any level. On any level.
Yes.
It's just been fascinating. And so sometimes we probably play down exactly the knowledge or the skill sets that we bring to our clients. And so you try to grab them one off, like you're doing, like one-on-one, like, let me at least get a hold of you and coach you up, because then if you're a manager in any way, shape, or form, you can have like a domino effect, and all of a sudden it becomes pervasive.
And it's so interesting that you bring that up, because that's a lot of times what ends up happening is maybe we'll have leadership recognize that they've got maybe managers or mid-managers who are ready to level up, but something's holding them back. And so they'll contact and say, hey, Kamini, can you work with this person? And let's see if we can help bring out what they need in order to move them forward. And to your point, exactly, they do the work. They're now showing up differently at work, but now it's going to have an effect on the team as a whole, right? Because it's going to have that domino effect. And then of course they step into leadership role. Now they're leading other people. So then they're going to lead other people in a different way. Exactly. Than how they may have learned to lead. This goes back to the parenting, right? If you show up as a different parent or you shift it, your children are going to show up differently. Same thing is if you go into and you do that one-on-one, that person's going to show up differently at work. They're now going to become a different type of leader. They're not just going to repeat what they've seen or assimilated previously.
I agree. I just think it's such great crucial work if you can just pluck off the individual contributors, because a lot of times and you've probably found that they don't want to employers don't want to invest like in group workshops or lunch and learns or things like this, because they don't see the immediate ROI. But to your exact point, it takes a while for the domino effect to be seen, but the ROI does show up, because once this person shows up differently, everyone else around them who is connected to their energetics and their, in their business situation will then all of a sudden show up differently. So it's a little hard to quantify that for when you're trying to pitch that in greater groups. It's a little hard to, get your arms around specific numbers, right? And so it's hard to tell them that, but look how important your work is, because it has already taken hold and affected a lot of people's lives. I wanted to circle back around because I'm interested in, tell me about some of the practices. I'm really interested and I really love knowing more about these types of things. What is internal family systems? Like, tell me a little bit about that and how does that play into your coaching?
So internal family systems was actually developed by Dick Schwartz, and it really looks at the fact that we have different parts of ourselves, and those parts together make up this internal family system, if you will, right? Yeah. And so when I'm coaching individuals, the thing that I always come back to is the relationship with self is the most important relationship we have. What does that mean? What that means is we need to get to a place of deep self-acceptance. Well, what does self-acceptance mean? Self-acceptance says, I love all parts of myself. And so through internal family systems, what we really recognize is, instead of saying, I've got to get rid of my anxiousness, like this anxiety is just holding me back. Instead, it's saying, there's a part of me that feels really anxious. Let's get compassionately curious with that part. What is that part trying to communicate? What is that part's intention? What is that part maybe potentially protecting you from? Because if we get curious with it, now instead of making that part bad or wrong, we move away from shame. Because what happens is when we do that, we're actually shaming ourselves. It's a covert way of shaming. Right. But what does shame do? Shame holds us back. Shame says there's something wrong with me. Well, if we're thinking something's wrong with us, what are we going to do? We're going to cower and we're going to shut down. Exactly. So instead, it leans into, what is this part about? Let me understand it better. once I have this understanding, I can bring these other parts of me online too, and they can actually work in concert with each other. So I can have this part that feels anxious, and I can give her, like, let's say with me, it's like that part of Kamini feels really anxious. What's her intention? Well, her intention isn't like, maybe with me, anxiety is trying to protect me from making a mistake. Why? Because I fear failure. Okay, great. Now this other part of me that knows that comes online and says, yes, but even if I make a mistake here, I'm going to be okay. And nothing bad is going to happen. I'm still going to have the roof over my head. I'm still going to have my family. I'm still going to have food on the table. All the things where the catastrophic thinking may occur. We bring those two things. They almost end up in dialogue with each other. And we recognize that we're not making this anxious part bad, but she doesn't need to run the show. So that's what internal family systems is all about, is recognizing that we can have.
Well, I had heard of that modality before, but I never dove, into it. And I think I took it more literally, like family, like the structure of your family. But the family in this case is really the family of personalities and different personas of your own self. That's interesting. Oh, I love that. And what a great value add, because that is quite a big part of when you are trying to get that breakthrough for people, is that there's competing forces. There's like the side that has like, bombastic energy and, oh, I've got this. And the other side is like, oh my God, don't look at me. Don't look at me. Do not look at me.
Exactly.
Like that is,
and they're competing with each other.
Yes. Yes. And so how to quell the waters a little bit. And the other part I think is interesting is that you have also married into bringing in that somatic piece. And I'm a huge fan of that, a huge fan. Tell me more about how you utilize that, or what it is, or just for our audience, because I'm a big fan about that.
So I use different parts of somatic work. So breath work is one of them, which I actually stumbled upon myself and realized the shift that I experienced, that shift where I recognized the huge emotional release that I had. So I decided, okay, I need to bring this into my practice, because sometimes, again, we're holding on to stuff and we can't get there cognitively. So if we can use breath, our life force, and we can just at least release some of that, because once it's released, then all of a sudden things open up, right?
Clear.
So that's one way. The other one in terms of somatic, though, is to go into and get really curious about what are the sensations. So for me, as an example, I do deal with anxiety. What I've learned is my body feels it first, right? Like I will feel some type of tightening in the pit of my stomach immediately. And if I can catch what my body's telling me and communicating to me earlier, I can get curious with it a bit earlier before it kind of overtakes and I'm feeling like completely stuck in my thoughts. So from a somatic perspective, just being able to pay attention to what are the sensations in my body, doing a body scan, recognizing that, and being able to not just recognize the sensations, but then describing them. Like, is it sort of a thick feeling? Is it sort of a fluttery feeling? Does it have a color? Does it have a shape, a temperature? Why do we do that? Because if we can give it some type of personification and we can allow it to actually be an experience rather than just like, oh, my body feels a certain way, but actually name it, we get curious with it. Like, what is this actually communicating to me? So for me, the tightening in my stomach is like, oh, this is communicating that there is something that I'm super afraid of. There's something that's scaring me. Okay, now I can pay attention to my nervous system. What's going on for my nervous system? So it's a through way into curiosity. It's a through way into awareness.
Don't you love that exists? It's like a biohack. I kind of put it under the category of a biohack, because it's a little hard. And again, like flexing, like, oh, if I'm telling a corporate group about it, how do I tell them about that without sounding very woo-woo and esoteric?
Exactly. Right.
Like, how do we do this so that it's receptive? They're receptive to the information. But honestly, quite honestly, it's a biological system. I mean, you're overriding like and upgrading the parasympathetic, and you're overriding like the autonomic nervous system, and trying to give a hack so you can keep that out of the way, get out of fight or flight, and bring up that calm, right? So I think there's ways of reframing that could be utilized by everybody. It's not like just, the yogis in the corner out there with their mats and then all of a sudden doing all this breath work. It quite literally is very useful across the board biologically. to help,
Yes, absolutely.
you know, and
Absolutely.
I only wish.
Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score,
Yes, I love
just,
that. I love that book.
right? It's why somatic work exists, because our
Yes,
body has that intelligence. And if we
it
just
does.
pay attention to it, we can learn so much from it.
And if you do a deep dive with a somatic breath work, like say you're doing it up to like 20 minutes or whatever,
Yep.
you can bring to the point where you are crying and you
Oh,
don't even know
100%.
why.
Exactly. That's what
So
happened to me. All of a sudden there's a release. There's a
yeah, it's
release.
released and
Absolutely.
it goes in a million different ways. Some people I've heard report, like kind of laughing or like giggling, like, oh my God, this is so funny, but you don't know why it's funny. It's like something crazy, but it's your nervous system,
Yes. Yes.
expunging this from, you hold on to all of that in our different organs. The liver, I hear, is a big one. I haven't
Yes.
done a deep dive. I've just practiced somatic breath work,
Mm-hmm,
but I have
mm-hmm,
not been like skilled or certified in it. Meditation I have, and that brings on its own interesting
mm-hmm.
setup. But adding breath work with the meditation, I'm with you. That's a whole different shifter. That shifts the game.
It totally does. It absolutely does. And yes, my whole experience with that breathwork session was, 20, I want to say maybe 13, 14 minutes in, the tears started to flow. 20 minutes in, it was like a
Yeah,
full
a
blown.
full on cry, like ugly cry, like you are just bawling and you don't really even know why. I mean, I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
couldn't even like put my finger on why am I so, what is going on? I
What
came
is
in
all
here
this?
like, oh, I'm just trying to relax. Next thing I'm like a mess in the corner somewhere, like you sat with plant medicine, like ayahuasca or something. I'm like, wait a minute, which I haven't done, but hey,
Yeah.
anything's on the table. I don't know about you, but all things are on the table. Like, what is that
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. Right. Right. Yes. Yes.
You have to stay curious in this area
Mhm,
because most people aren't curious. And
mhm,
so
mhm,
it is up to seekers like
mhm.
yourself to seek out this other next level information so that you can share with your clients, and then again the domino effect goes out from there. The more information you share. Two
Exactly.
more things I wanted to know before I let you go is how hard was it for you to shift gears into this new
Mhm,
career path? Because when we're talking success leaves clues, which is my series here, I have found in personal experience that the biggest thing is, especially like if you're in a relationship or a committed relationship, or if you have children, you have people dependent on you, um,
mhm,
that it's a hard sell for the spouse or
mhm.
to talk yourself like into like, oh my gosh, what if this doesn't work out? I've got to feed the kids, I've got to pay my mortgage, I've
Mhm.
got all of these things. It's really scary to make this
Yeah, absolutely.
stark pivot and to do something like
Absolutely.
this as your
Yep.
main source of income, or sometimes you can kind of do it on the side and you ease
Sure.
into it. But
Mhm.
what gave you the guts to just say, I'm doing it, I'm doing it?
Yeah. And that's such a great question, because the truth is that it wasn't an easy pivot, because everybody knew me a certain way, right? Mom goes to work and does all these things, and what do you mean you want to start your own thing? That's
Yeah,
super
what does that
scary.
mean?
For me, it was truly a shift in it's time. It's time for me to do something that I'm choosing to do rather than what I should do. And it was sitting with a lot of discomfort. And what I mean by that is other people feeling discomfort about my choice.
Mm,
So like my spouse being like, I don't know about this. I'm not sure that this is what we need to do. The kids being like, what, mom, you're going to have your own business. And being okay, especially as a people pleaser, being okay with them somewhat questioning it. Because for me, it was listening to my own inner voice, and the knowing, going back to what you said before, you know, there was the North Star, and it was the acceptance for me that this was my North Star. I was being called to do this work, and continually regrounding into, well, this is a North Star for me. This is a North Star for me. And that's what gave me the guts to keep going.
I mean, I understand. I love it, and I applaud you from just continuing to follow that internal integrity, because we're the only ones who can hear our own internal promptings,
Hmm.
our own
Yes.
internal voice, our intuition, and sometimes they just have to have no choice but to just believe that we are correct in our following. That we're
Hmm.
following that prompt. And, you know, and but it can cause, you know, it can cause some problems internally for, you know, financial reasons and your contribution financially. And it really does have a ripple effect. That's why I think a lot of people don't do it. Right. And so
Yeah.
I think that's why I like to talk to people who do it because a lot of people won't, and they'll go through the
Very
rest
true.
of their life to their deathbed and just always wonder what if.
What if,
You know, and I think there's nothing that is more of a tormenting thought than that.
Yeah.
I should have tried.
Absolutely. I should have tried. You know, and that was the thing too, is at worst case scenario, it doesn't work. So then what will I do? I'll go back and work.
I'll go
You know,
back.
so it was really just coming back to that. Like I don't lose all that I did before. I still know how to do all of that. I
Right.
can clearly go back if I need to. So it was just reminding myself that really what's the worst case scenario here?
Yeah. Yeah. Worst case, you know, like, or if you're not doing it, if you don't go it, you're already living your worst case scenario because you're
Right.
on your
You're not even giving
way
yourself a chance. Exactly.
to the end
Exactly.
without making any big choices and just playing it safe and going, oh my God, I really wish I would have done this, or, you know,
Yep.
and that's a whole other thing to unpack, right? Is, you know, you don't want to have to face yourself. You don't want to face them questioning what you're doing, but worse yet, you don't want to face yourself.
It's yourself.
You know, and
Exactly.
so I understand that completely. So I applaud you for making the pivot and to, you know, learn as you go and kind of quaff your craft a little bit and understand what the needs are, and you're meeting them, you're responding to the needs, and I think your work is really important and in the world, and very validating because it changes people's lives. And I'm sure you've gotten feedback from your clients who have said, amazing,
Yeah.
you know.
And
Like,
honestly, those are those moments where you are not that I lean on that to validate, but instead it's leaning on that to recognize that this my North Star meant something. You know, this serves that purpose. So,
that it is not steering you wrong, you know, and
Mhm.
it's purpose. It's a purpose, not just a career. And it's, you know,
Exactly.
I often ask myself, would I do this for free if I wasn't, yeah, the answer is,
Yeah.
and not that I want to shout that
Mhm.
out to everybody, but the reality of the situation is I was born to do it as well. And so, you know, when you know.
Yeah.
You know, I love it. Well, I applaud you for doing this. And do you have any big plans in the horizon, or where do you practice at? Do you do online, or how can we find you, or how could somebody work with you if they wanted to?
Yeah, so I do work virtually because I work with people all across the world. And if anybody's interested in learning more, website is kaminiwood.com,
Okay.
Facebook and Instagram, the handles it's authentic me. I'm going to continue my one-on-one practice. It's what really drives me. I am starting to speak more to corporate groups around things, just around topics such as stress, anxiety, burnout, all of those lovely topics. Why? Because if we can get some information out there to people, they can make those changes that they need to in order to help themselves.
Yeah.
So definitely building that part of the practice as well.
That is awesome. Well, I will make sure that I put all of your contact information in the show notes. And you'll be hearing this episode on Instagram and Facebook. I'll list it on all the appropriate places so that you can find Kamini if this is sounding interesting, like, oh, I like her approach, or I like how she's thinking on this, and maybe she can help me. And so I would invite anyone to give her a connection and see what she has to say. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to this, and what your practice looks like, because it's doing good in the world. And I appreciate that.
Thank
So
you so much for
thank you
having me.
so much for your time. And we will connect again, perhaps,
Sounds
especially on
great.
social media. We will make
Yes.
sure we do that. All right. Well, take care, Kamini. Thank
Take
you so
care.
much. Have a great rest of the week.
Bye-bye.